Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings to the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to a Riddle song, poem number 8 of the 22 of From Noon to Starry Night. It's a wonderful companion read to All Is Truth, the poem that we just finished with. And in some ways you can think about the game that Whitman loves to play. And the riddle, the word riddle, will play that game brilliantly. He loves to play around with language. I told you guys, I think he's having a great time all the way through the writing of these poems in Leaves of Grass. And finally, at the deathbed edition moment, when he's putting these poems in their final order, I think he's doing this intentionally. You'll remember that we said in our introductory set of comments to Starry Night that we're always trying in this cluster to reconcile the paradoxes. In the last poem, it was, of course, the idea of lies and truth. Here, we're going to ask about a fundamental element of existence and what it is, and can we get there through a riddle. And of course, the most famous riddle of them all is the famous riddle of the Sphinx. One animal walks on 2 legs, on 4 legs in the morning, on 2 legs at noon, and on 3 legs in the evening. And of course, it will be kind of left up to the reader to try to figure out what in the end Oedipus is able to say and figure out. Oh, you're talking about the human being who crawls on all 4 legs in the morning, walks on 2 legs at noon, and then in the evening of his life uses the cane, i.e. 3 legs, right? Now our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt, our playlist, and then you've been with us from the very beginning, and the very introductory word come, that is to say the invitation word. We're playing a very similar game here with the words riddle song as being our title. As I said, I gave a set of introductory comments to Starry Night, and I'm hopeful that you have followed that in as well. I'm hopeful that you've messed around with All Is Truth. Now our Nortons, that gives us some background information, will say that this is one of the new poems of the 1881 Leaves of Grass. A riddle song was first published in Fournier's Progress, Philadelphia, April 17, 1880. April 17th, 1880, with acknowledgement to the Sunnyside Press. And then in parenthetics, Norton's tells us that Whitman's letter of May 9th, 1880 to John Burroughs is going to provide us with this information. Dr. R.M. Burke wrote to Whitman, August the 29th, 1888, that he had been thinking over the riddle song and had made up his mind that the answer was, quote, good cause, because there's got to be 2 words for the riddle to be answered, or old cause, end quote. Struble reports, another one close to Whitman, that the poet would not verify. In other words, not only does he throw out this riddle song to us as readers, but he never actually tells us what the answer to the riddle is. However, Whitman is purported to have said the following, quote, Horace, I made the puzzle. It's not my business to solve, end quote. In his Flight of a Book for the World, page 188, W.S. Kennedy, however, ventures another guess, that the 2 words are the ideal. And certainly, I mean, that makes sense. I love that we can read this and enjoy it for our own. Now, I love what I read in the last lecture, and so we'll go back to it for just a moment. You will remember this set of lines from Song of Myself, passage 2. I think it has a lot to do with our reading of this passage. He says, Whitman says, stop this day and night with me, and you shall possess the origin of all poems. You shall possess the good, it's possible that's the answer to the riddle, of the earth and the sun. There are millions of suns left. You shall no longer take things at second or third hand, nor look through the eyes of the dead, nor feed on the specters and bugs. This will take us back to ancient Greek mythology, maybe even Plato himself. You shall not look through my eyes either. The heart of a riddle is constructed for this. Nor take things from me. You shall listen to all sides. Listen here obviously mean considering. And filter them from yourself. Now I think that set of lines works beautifully for this riddle song. Just to remind, by the way, riddle was used in Song of Myself 17. That's the only other use of this phrase. And the word song will have been used 19 times before we ever get to Song of Myself in the Deathbed Edition. Obviously, we understand his use of the word song in music. He says it this way. That which eludes this verse, and any verse, he begins with the word that, because this is going to be the riddle. What is it that eludes this verse and any verse? We've been saying all the way through these lectures, translinguistic. It's There's the most important stuff often in our life just can't be given to words, right? It's beyond words, beyond language. Unheard by sharpest ear, unformed in clearest eye, or cunningest mind. Cunningness gets used once in all these graphs. It's right here, of course, a riddle. Nor lore, nor fame, nor happiness, nor wealth, those four things. In other words, the answer to this riddle is more important than any of those things. And yet, the pulse of every heart, we know how he's used this word pulse, right? Of every heart in life throughout the world, incessantly. You'll remember his use of that word incessantly and out of the cradle endlessly rocking. Which you and I in all pursuing ever miss. I told you how he loves to take the same word and stack it 2 times, ever miss. In other words, what is at the heart of what we all long for the most? It's a fun riddled question, right? Open, but still a secret, obvious and yet somehow clandestine. The real of the real, an illusion. You'll remember this drawn toward me in his use of the word illusion. Costless, vouchsafed to each, yet never man the owner. Very interesting. Which, notice now, you'll get 3 of these whiches. Which poets, you're going to get 7 of these types of people. Which poets vainly seek to put in rhyme, historians in prose, which sculptor never chiseled yet, nor painter painted, which vocalist never sung, ironically given the title of this poem is Riddle Song, nor orator nor actor ever uttered. Invoking here, again, this use of the word invocation of the muse comes to mind. And now I challenge for my song. It's a wonderful first set of lines that gives you a simple sentence. What is the thing that most challenges all of us to try and figure out what it's all about? Indifferently, mid-public, private haunts, in solitude. In other words, whatever the answer is to this riddle, it's going to be indifferent to the public or to the private. It's going to work in solitude, behind the mountain in the wood. I love the use of the word behind. Certainly Emerson would have loved that in his essay on nature, right? No question, or his essay, Nature. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. Companion of the city's busiest streets. In other words, both urban as well as out in the woods. Through the assemblage, it and its radiations constantly glide. I love radiations in a collection of poems from noon to starry night. And his use of the word glide, I think, is perfect. That's the perfect verb. It seems to kind of flow through. In looks of fair unconscious babes. Of course, if you've ever looked at a child for long, it's almost as if they know things that we don't. You'll remember Unconscious in Song of the Redwood Tree #1, in Lilac's Last 14, later in the second annex, we'll hear it one more time with a Persian lesson. Or, not only is it there with the child at the beginning, strangely, in the coffined dead. In other words, when you look at a brand new child born, by the way, notice from noon to starry night, right? As well as when you look at in the face of a dead person, a corpse, somehow this riddle is always at play. Or show of breaking dawn or stars by night. Obviously, noon to starry night comes to as some dissolving delicate film of dreams. We saw this in the Sleepers, didn't we? Hiding, yet lingering. Notice this use of the word lingering, and as I pondered in silence. In other words, this riddle won't go away. What is fundamental? What is elemental that both newborn children as well as corpses, newly passed corpses understand? Then we're going to get to two little breaths of words comprising it. So now we know. Whatever the riddle is, it can be answered in 2 words. 2 words, yet all from first to last comprised in it. Very interesting. 2. Now, if he had said 3, we could easily say leaves of grass. And many readers will in fact say leaves, grass. Those are the 2 words. Now we're going to get 8 hows of this anaphoria at the beginning. How ardently for it. In other words, once you start thinking about this question, what is the fundamental, elemental meaning of all of life? You ardently want to know how many ships have sailed and sunk for it, the basis of all exploration, and obviously we're thinking about our Homer's Odyssey. How many travelers started from their homes and ne'er returned. Obviously, now we are thinking about Odysseus' men, aren't we? How much of genius boldly staked and lost for it? You'll remember this word boldly, and thy mother with her equal brood. What countless stores, you remember how he uses measureless? It cannot be measured. What countless stores of beauty, love, ventured for it. In other words, we're willing to almost give up everything to try and get the answer to this riddle. What is foundational? How all heroic, how all superbest deeds since time, notice capitalized, began, are traceable to it and shall be to the end. By the way, you can see all these exclamation points. There's 8 of them to finish this. How all heroic martyrdoms to it. The word martyrdoms gets used once only in Leaves of Grass, and it's right here. How justified, makes us think of our Plato's Republic 1, right? How justified by it, the horrors, evils, battles of the earth. There's his theodicy. In other words, whatever the answer is to this riddle, it explains why all the pain and suffering and horror of the world must happen. How the bright, fascinating, lampant flames, we've seen his use of fire and flames in Leaves of Grass, of it, in every age and land, have drawn men's eyes. Rich as a sunset on the Norway coast, that's a fascinating simile, isn't it? The sky, the islands, and the cliffs, or midnight silent glowing northern lights, unreachable. Think about the power of the last poem here in this collection in Midnight being used right here. The idea of it being unreachable is, of course, translinguistic. Then he uses the word happily, which takes us back to the very first opening lines in Cabin Ships at Sea. God's riddle it. Notice the interesting syntax that he uses here. So vague, and yet so certain. The soul for it, and all the visible universe for it, and heaven at last for it. Well, what is the it? Well, it's 2 words and it's a riddle. You get to decide, and Whitman himself never actually came out and said exactly what it was. Some have said it's the soul, some have said it's some notion to do with love or learning or something like that. I'm going to leave all that up to you. But I think the argument that he's making is that the greatest truths are the riddles of the great poets and the great artists. And if you'll think about it, Whitman has been playing a riddle game with us all the way from the very first word when he invited us to come. Well, I love this, the power of the riddle, the game that gets played, the laughter that we're always referencing in Leaves of Grass. In other words, I think he's having a great time. He's having a lot of fun. At 3A, obviously, the riddle of the Sphinx comes to mind. And then, of course, even before, think about the poem that came before and the question of what is truth. It's interesting. Is truth the answer to this riddle? The logos the answer to this riddle? Well, I don't know, at 3B, how are we going to own a poem like this? It's funny to me how students are like, wow, this collection of poems, Leaves of Grass, continues to challenge me. Now I'm really interested. I wonder what he thought the 2-word answer to the riddle was. What do you think is the answer to the riddle? And in what ways is your studying of Leaves of Grass like playing, in some ways, with the riddle and the genius of Whitman as the great riddle master, we might say? Thank you.